Our first presentation is entitled Data Meet Digital, supporting your company's digital transformation journey. And in it, we will be hearing from Michael Gonzales, who is Chief Data Scientist at Prolifics. And he's going to be discussing how you can best support digital transformation within your organization and how to bring data and digital together into one space and link those two areas together. So just a reminder, don't forget to submit your questions to Michael throughout the presentation. I will put them to him in about 30 minutes or so. Without any further ado, I'll hand straight over to Michael.
Thank you, James. So the title of our presentation, I'm going to go back one, is Vision to Value. and the premise of that title is the type of engagements that we're encountering and we've been actively involved with in organizations, both domestically in Canada and the US, as well as around the world. And the overriding message of vision to value is really what we're encountering is a misalignment where business isn't necessarily getting all of the value out of their data science teams, which causes a great deal of frustration, reduced ROI, all of the things that you can imagine. But it also causes frustration on the data science teams as well, not necessarily having the right direction, maybe not necessarily even getting the right types of use cases that are leveraged by the application of data science. So vision to value is really about trying to align business and data science teams together in order to get that kind of value, to get that cadence and that momentum in data science solutions being delivered, all the data science solutions having some business value and impact. So that's the purpose of that title. So I'm going to start, though, with a article from the Harvard Business Review. Now, this is 2018. You can find it online, or if you subscribe to the Harvard Business Review, you might even have that journal. But in that article, I'm borrowing a quote. The worst mistake a company can make is to hire data scientists, give them access to data, and turn them loose and expect them to find something brilliant, expose some kind of insight. Now, you may not think that that's what's happening, but I, for one, have been involved in those types of engagements where a client has said, look, we're going to give you a lot of data, and you tell us what you find. That is not how data science works. That is absolutely not the right approach for a data science project. A lot of specificity is generally required for data science initiatives. Now, you might have some think tank sitting in your organization that you can throw a bunch of data at and let them think away. But the vast majority of data science initiatives and data scientists are specifically in an organization to bring business value. That's really our job, right? So business value, business impact, that's what we are responsible for delivering. We can't deliver that without business involvement. So this kind of a quote is really indicative of an organization where business is accustomed to writing a check, throwing it over the wall, and turning loose a gaggle of data science geeks and then wait for them to come back with something. Really a bad approach. And the same article goes on and it lists out a couple of failures, and they listed out top 5. There's nothing magical about top 5. It's just, they've isolated top 5 that they've identified. The failure to manage the data scientists properly, So again, if you're writing a check, you're throwing it over the fence, you're expecting the data scientists to go out there and do their thing and come back with something great, that is not the right way to manage a data science team properly. Another failure that they point to is not focusing the data science program correctly. So maybe the data science team is kind of pulled all over the map and there isn't really any kind of focus or any kind of business agenda that captures the attention of the data science team and keeps them on a short leash, keeps them on a productive path, right? The third one that they outline is having the data scientists actually in the wrong place of an organization. So we have seen organizations that have data science teams literally peppered throughout the organization. And oftentimes they're competing and they're actually, attempting to solve the same problem. That's probably not necessarily the best use of data science resources, or they have the data science team tucked away somewhere. Maybe the data science team is part of the research department, or it's part of the marketing department. And there's really a broader application of data science. So, we always question whether or not the data science team being tucked away in a particular department is the right location for them either. And then they go on to say that oftentimes organizations view data science as a technical initiative versus a business initiative. And I can understand why business is really thinking, okay, well, it's a bunch of statistics and machine learning and all that stuff. So it's a technical thing, right? That's really not true. The data science solutions in organizations should be business driven. They should really only be business initiatives. They're not designed, or generally they're not invested to conduct some pedantic kind of research. Their purpose is to deliver business value. And so consequently, they should be a business initiative and not a technical exercise. And then finally, a point that they make, which is like this perennial issue that just, you would think that we would overcome this issue, but we don't. We always underestimate the pushback an organization is going to have with regard to change. I've heard executives say, yeah, we tried, they tried to do some predictive algorithm and it really never produced what we wanted, so we just don't use it anymore. So basically it failed once and, it's just a bunch of nonsense. We're not going to, we've got our own way to kind of move forward. It's that kind of organizational change that really has to get adjusted as well. But if you notice, all of these challenges, all of these failures, they really are symptoms of what we describe as a tangled mess. And that tangled mess is really a tangle of business and data science. They're just stepping on each other. They're not really getting anything productive done. They seem to be always constantly struggling with what should be done and how it should be done, and are we getting the value out of it? And all of that kind of stuff just really messes with the productivity of either business or data science. So one thing that I want to point out, though, is all of those failures that Harvard Business Review draws out, none of them are about skill. Now, there's an issue of a scarcity of skills of data scientists, to be sure, but the failures aren't necessarily that you can't find the right skill. The failures aren't that you don't have a great technical platform like Watson Studio or Azure. Those aren't the failures. It isn't a technical issue. It isn't a skill issue. All of those top failures are about the application of a data science initiative and the application of data scientists to the profit of business, to the benefit of business. It's the application of data science that are the failures, not the tools or the skills. And that's an important thing to note. So what we do is we actually take that tangled mess, and that begins our journey with our clients. And to give you an idea of what represents this tangled mess, I'm giving you I think I've listed like 4 different questions. Is business having a hard time communicating requirements to the data science team? Is that something that your organization is experiencing? Are you frustrated that you keep on trying to say these things to the data science people and they seem to be doing something else? They don't seem to be delivering what we want. Or we tell them what we want, they go off and 6 months later they come back and they present something that just simply isn't what we wanted, or because it took 6 months, it's not something that we need anymore. Another thing that you might be experiencing, do the data science projects that you actually do get deployed, which might be few, do they provide little or no value? In other words, when they finally were deployed, the business changed and they're not really delivering the value, or the accuracy of what you thought you would get out of it just simply isn't there. We encounter many organizations that, they throw a lot of business use cases at the data science teams, and then what gets out at the back end is a kind of like a drip of solutions that actually do finally get deployed. And of those that finally do get deployed, many of them are experiencing little or no value. So that might be something that you're experiencing in your own organization. Another common thing we see are the data science solutions developed with little business input. Now, this might be a symptom of the first two questions that I put forward. They're delivering very little value, and there's bad communication between business and data science teams. So I would consequently expect that you're getting that business is probably not engaged in the entire development cycle of a data science solution, which is a giant mistake, and we'll talk about that here in a second. And then finally, something that we encounter all the time. How often do you hear we don't have the data weeks, possibly months after the initiative started? So you sponsored a use case, the data science team sped off to do their thing. 90 days later, they come back and say, we looked around, we explored stuff, we tried different options, we really don't have the data to do what you wanted to do. What an incredible waste of time. What an incredible inefficiency. And we try to correct these kind of symptoms in the organizations in which we work. And we do that by really, and it's one simple slide here, a simple graphic, but what we really are striving to do is to create synergy, and that synergy is between business and data science teams. And it comes across in a variety of different flavors, right? It comes across as alignment, where business now is leading the data science team, and not data science teams trying to build stuff that they think business is going to think is of value. We look for solutions where business is actively engaged in the entire development cycle. We look where education is important. We either are educating executives about how to best apply data science and what are data science type of use cases. And then we educate data science teams on their role. Your role in this whole organization is to support business, right? So we spend a lot of time educating and explaining roles and processes. And then we also implement the processes themselves, whether it's the data science methodologies or the application of, say, for instance, an agile development process. As proof of that, of our effectiveness, I point to one of our clients, $62 billion a year healthcare, that because of the methods that we applied that we'll discuss here in this presentation, they're able to increase their productivity by twofold. So what used to take maybe 90 days to get done is now taking 30 days or less. A perfect example of this is a situation where they would normally spend 90 days wandering around looking to see if they have the right data for the right solution, all that kind of stuff. Now they were able to resolve it for one client in the first sprint. And that's just simply because of how we organize how we mitigate for risk, how we organize and identify the most potential risk areas, and then we address them first. And if we address them in the first sprint, we can get that done in a week or two. So we not only have reduced the amount of time that it takes to get anything done between business and data science towards a solution, and that of course increases the return on investment for business. But because we've reduced the amount of time that this data science team takes, they're actually more productive because they could do more work. So even using the same resources, not increasing the resources, just applying good solid methodologies and techniques, we're able to more than double their productivity. So I want to take you through a couple of the steps that we take our clients through. And there's no real particular order in this. It just happens to be topics that that we want to cover. the establishment of a business-focused methodology. To the surprise to many data scientists, there are methodologies that are already well established and published that really are focused on the application of data science for business. We try to implement those types of methodologies for our organizations, as well as educate the data science teams on their value. Then we help the business and data science to generate and mature the right ideas for the application of data science. And then we integrate a business representation in the development process. So I'm going to talk about each one of these separately. So let's start with this business-focused methodology. For those of you who have done any kind of research in this area, if you look at the business understanding, data understanding, modeling, and deployment, those 4 circles and their union, these are common elements to well-documented, well-published methodologies, approaches for the application of advanced analytics or data science. So I'll point to CRISP, which is promoted by IBM, or I'll point to Azure's methodology. Those 4 components are expressed in either one of those. So we help data science teams understand the value of each one of these components and how they should be approached within their organization. And we also can help organizations to tailor the process. So in this particular case, I have a vision to use case separate from the core 4 elements. And that's simply because some of our clients have a hard time coming up with the right use cases. And so a good mature use case is an important part of that productivity of any data science team. So I have that as a separate component, and we've gotten very good at implementing that particular component as part of a cohesive whole. The value of having a data-centric type of methodology, it guarantees the active participation of business. So as an example, the first big circle there of those 4 in that blender is business understanding. So when we have business actually contributing to our understanding of what they're wanting to achieve, it's going to have a direct impact on data understanding. And if we go out there and we look around and we find that the data may not be exactly fitting our business understanding, we immediately go back to business and expose that. You know, we don't have any of the data to get this done. You know, let's call it quits, go on to the next use case. Or we've got most of the data, there's some data quality problems that might reduce the accuracy. Do you want to go ahead and move forward or not? And you can discuss the pros and cons. But it's always this constant interplay between the elements of the development process and business understanding. Next is it's a continual evaluation. So I gave you the example of business understanding and data understanding having an impact together. But the data understanding, if it changes, then it also will have an impact on the modeling, right, for feature engineering and all the other fun stuff that the actual modeling would exercise. But if the model is changed, so the original idea was to have an accuracy of, you know, I don't know, 85% confidence level. And you go and you do the modeling and you find out that at the end of the day, we only have 69% or 75%. Then you immediately go back to business and say, here's our accuracy. This is what we can expect as the value and impact at the back end once this is deployed. And it's up to business to decide whether or not that's going to be sufficient. That's not a data science question. That's a business question, right? Is that a sufficient value and impact to consider? If business says absolutely, then we can press on with the development process. If not, then we can rethink what we want to do, and maybe part of that might be just to table this and go on to the next use case. But business is constantly engaged, and having that conscious involvement of business helps remind the data science team that this is a business initiative and not a technical or a pedantic exercise. And finally, once it's deployed, and that's a big thing about data science solutions is oftentimes they're embedded in, you know, a big application stack. So they're one little piece of a huge, web application and, order fulfillment stack. And oftentimes it ends up kind of getting lost in all of the complexity of the application. And that's unfortunate, because then when you want to measure, did I get the value out of that data science solution, it might be a little bit more difficult, and oftentimes is, to actually understand what was the end value of that data science solution, the overall impact of that solution on our application stack. So what we argue for early on is that the deployment of our solutions, or of an organization's solutions, must be monitored and measured. So it's a conscious deployment with the idea that it must be monitored and measured, because there could be several things going on in the back end that aren't any fault of the data science solution or of business or of even the deployment that could change the effectiveness of that model. But first and foremost, business must be able to measure and monitor explicitly the contribution of that data science solution. And if you don't take it explicitly as part of your deployment, it oftentimes will just simply get lost. All right, so that talks about the methodology. And again, we bring the big methodologies that are already widely published. We help business to understand, data science teams to understand the methodology, and then where appropriate, we'll customize the methodology to the organization. And then the second thing I want to talk about is this whole notion of a vision to use case. So a big part of a productive business data science cadence is really having good, solid use cases from which the data science team can actually be executing, developing. To get there is a little bit more difficult for many organizations. To give you just as a kind of a brief outline, in our vision workshops, and the term vision isn't a prolific term, it's an actual agile term. And the idea of vision is to think of ideas that are business transformative, are competitive advantages. Oftentimes we find organizations keep on thinking of the same thing. They trod down the same path. Well, I've always been asking for this same metric, or I've always been asking for access to this data, and those might be important things that need to get done, but maybe those are BI challenges or reporting challenges. They're really not oftentimes in the realm of data science. So we try to encourage our clients in these vision workshops is to, I know it's a cliche, but to think out of the box, right? Really to think beyond. And so we'll use, industry competitive advantage ideas that have come from different potentially competitors, but certainly within different markets that the current client might be competing, just to stimulate them to think of other things that might be of a competitive advantage. Now, these workshops are made up of business and the data science teams together. And what we do is we go through a whole series. It's a nice formal workshop. We go through a whole series to create innovative ideas and then to actually rank and prioritize these ideas. These types of workshops aren't necessarily new. There's a lot of great, well-proven tools, dot voting, how now, wow matrix that we use to guide the workshop to rank and prioritize which ideas the group thinks have the most legs, the most opportunity for success, can have the biggest value and impact. And then we start with a smaller list, we start refining those visions into valid use cases. And that refinement process starts looking at not just the idea, but then do we have the data? Do we think we have the data? Is it going to be using the same data that we use already in existing applications? Do we know how it's going to be deployed? Is it a new deployment that's going to create a whole web app that we need to consider in our project development? Or is it going to supplant an existing data science solution that we already have deployed? So these are important things to consider. And they go a long way to maturing an idea into a development-ready use case. At the end of our workshop, we really have what we call candidate use cases. And those candidate use cases get into the product backlog. Again, the product backlog is an agile term, just like vision is an agile term. And in the product backlog, there's going to be use cases of various levels of maturity. At the very top are going to be use cases that are development ready. You know, we're well-defined. We pretty much know where the data is. We know how it's going to be deployed. We've got the sponsors. We think we've got the budget. We're ready to go. And then at the bottom is going to be maybe ideas, maybe at least, you know, use cases that haven't quite formalized yet. So we want to keep them on our radar. We want to keep on working on them, but they're not necessarily development ready. So we're going to concentrate on those at the top of our product backlog first. This product backlog is literally business driven. It's ranking those things that business wants to do, and the things that are most development ready surface to the top. So from a business perspective, we're not only doing the right application of data science for competitive advantage, but the entire product backlog is filled with use cases that we want to get done that are important to business. From a data science perspective, it's equally important, but for a different reason. It's a pipeline of mature and prioritized business work. So the data science team is looking at a whole stack of things that need to get done and have confidence that the things that they're going to be doing are top priority for the business. So they're not going to be working on stuff just because they're working on stuff. They're working on stuff because it's important to business. And if business changes, they're going to change that product backlog. And something else new will surface to the top, and the data science teams will concentrate on that. So it not only gives them a pipeline, but it allows the data science team to move in sync with business. So as business changes, the data science team, the development process, the work that they're doing in their development process changes as well. All right, so let's go on to the last piece, which is really business drives the solution development itself. So I have just kind of a rough sketch to simplify stuff, but really we're adopting the Agile Framework. So an Agile Framework is all about collaboration and not a bunch of documentation. It's all about short development cycles to produce incremental value. That will drive towards a complete solution. But it's quick value, quick turnaround, so business and data science teams can get into a cadence and into a routine of being able to deliver these short bursts of development effort that build to a data science solution and get to the solution quicker. I mean, that's the whole purpose of Agile. And the technique of choice for us is Scrum. So Scrum is the technique we're using for our Agile framework. And to go just kind of briefly through some of the big components, we've talked about the product backlog in the previous slide. Business, again, it's worth doubling down on here. Business owns the product backlog. So that doesn't mean like one executive must be engaged in all the development cycle and all that kind of stuff. That's not what we're saying here. But a business representative must be the owner to that product backlog. Now, there may be 6 or 7 sponsors that all have a stake in that product backlog, but they're going to have one face. That business representative will be that one face to the data science team, to the development effort. And as the sponsors change their requirements, that business representative needs to be constantly monitoring and grooming that product backlog to make sure that it's reflecting what the sponsors want achieved. The data science team are the owners of this much smaller sprint backlog. So the business says, this is the next use case I want you to work on. The data science team knows that they've got a sprint. So it could be a 1-week sprint, a 2-week sprint. And they're going to say, look, of that use case, we can get these things done, or these things are the most important things, or this is the riskiest thing that we want to do first. And it's a negotiation between business and the data science team. Literally, the scrum, if you follow rugby, the scrum is business and data science teams working together. They are negotiating what that sprint is going to be. So what that sprint backlog is really going to achieve during this 2-week effort or this 1-week effort. At the back end, you'll see that this is that we show the increment. That's the target for this 1-week, 2-week effort, whatever the time frame is for each one of your sprints. And then, of course, there's a sprint review at the end of this 2-week time frame, for example, if that's your sprint size. And that's when all of business is invited. So if all of the sponsors want to get together and look at what was actually done in these 2 weeks, they would do it at that point. So business doesn't have to always, or all executives don't always get engaged throughout the entire development cycle. They have a representative that represents all of their interests in that product backlog, who stays engaged with the development team. And then at the end of every sprint, the sponsors they can, if they want to, they can join in the sprint review or not. It's strictly up to them. But that's their opportunity to join in and make decisions about the next sprint. You know, that's great, or that's really bad, that's not what we wanted, so let's move on to something different. Or it might stimulate new ideas. So those are those 3 areas that kind of work in concert, right? So a methodology for data scientists to understand how business fits together in the application of data science. The vision workshops so that business and data science teams can generate the use cases that are of most value and impact for business. And then business being actively engaged in the development cycle, in this case, an agile approach to data science solutions. So we call this a vision to value framework. And I know I have them numbered here. That other than the first one, there isn't really any true order. It depends on what the client wants to do first. Sometimes the client wants us to work with formalizing the processes first and the methodologies first with the data science team, so it's stabilized and they have standards. Sometimes the client is really just struggling with getting the right use cases and communicating with the data science team. So the 2 through 5 can kind of change depending on what the business needs. But we always start our vision to value framework with a whiteboard session to get a sense of the ecosystem and to get a sense of the data science teams and the business components, get a sense of how they're interacting with each other and where might be the major pain points that we have to focus in on. So I think that's my 30 minutes. We've given some contact information. I suspect others will offer up some more. So with that, I'll open it up to any kind of questions.
Thank you, Michael. And with that, if you want to get a question in to Michael, then do please submit that through the Q&A module, and we'll get through as many of those as we can. And while the audience is doing that, I was just going to kick off with a question of my own, which is really, how would you recommend that people go about getting started on this? So if you were, the first day or the first week of a project to kind of utilize that approach, where would you recommend they start? What are the kind of immediate priorities and tasks that you'd recommend?
So the first step I would recommend is just a whiteboard session, where our senior data scientists and business and their data science teams really kind of work together to better understand the challenges, right? So it's really a kind of a short workshop where everybody's able to offer up the pain points or the challenges that they're experiencing, and for us to better understand and ask questions, and for all intents and purposes to interrogate business and data science so that we can craft out a tactical roadmap. So that would be the first point, is really executing a whiteboard session.
Great, thank you for that. And we've had a question come through here from Kirthi at Simon Fraser University, and they say, I can relate to those 4 question scenarios that happen quite often in an institution. All these questions indicate business impacting the data science team. But how feasible is it to start with data and then drive business decisions? For example, if you have interview data results of key user personas to drive business-related decisions. So I suppose the question is, how do you start with the data and then use that to drive the business decisions?
I really wouldn't urge any data science team to go off on their own and say, look, we have a whole pile of data out here. I'll bet you if we structure it, unstructured data, interview notes, we'll make it nice and pretty and structure it, and I'll bet you that that's going to drive some business questions. I really don't recommend that approach unless you're a research team. I mean, if that's your sole purpose in life is to kind of invent stuff, then maybe that's the right approach for you. But for the vast majority of data science, you really have to have a requirement, and it helps focus the data science resources. So without that, you have really no focus, and you're just offering up, you're offering up potential opportunities for business, but there's no guarantee that business even cares about it. So since we're spending business money, it's important to have business actually give us the requirements, and then we drive. Look, obviously data is important, but with the business requirement, it gives us definition of what kind of data is necessary to get it done, right? So I always recommend starting with the business requirement. These are business initiatives, and it's business money that we're spending, and it's business value that we should be bringing to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. We do have a couple more minutes, so if you have any further questions, do get those in, and we'll try and tackle as many as possible. The next one we have here is, so this person said, we have tried Agile. Too many meetings, too many business groups needing to provide input. How is your development process different to that? You can feel the pain in the question there, I think, can't you?
I see that a lot. So there's a couple of things. First of all, I sit in as a Scrum Master in listening in on Agile planning sessions, and I got to tell you, a lot of organizations are talking Agile. They have all the right words, but they're actually not practicing Agile to any stretch. So I have seen Scrum teams of 20 people. Your Scrum team, even in the most sophisticated world, maybe, including the Scrum Master and business, is maybe 11. Literally nobody in Agile's world recommends a Scrum team that's greater than 9 developers. Frankly, you probably should be around 3 to 4. So I got to tell you, there's plenty of times, plenty of evidence where they might say the right things in Agile, but they're not necessarily practicing Agile, number one. Number two is that business, there shouldn't be a bazillion meetings. But there are some must meetings, and some must meetings, like a Scrum meeting, it's just a daily checkpoint. I've got nothing new to report is perfectly valid for a Scrum meeting. Get on with it, right? That's why they're called standing. It's basically like sitting next to the water cooler and saying, what's your update? What's your update? What's your okay? And then go into your neutral corners and get on with your work. So these long, elaborate meetings, I don't understand either, because that's not the original intent. They ventured way off from the Agile. So I know that you might be experiencing some bad Agile practices, but that doesn't mean that Agile isn't right for data science initiatives. And so we would argue that we'd want to help you to tune that process so that your teams get a better understanding of how that Agile process is supposed to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. And hopefully that answers your question to the person. I could feel the pain coming through. So hopefully that gives you some ideas. We've had the next question comes from Bertrand from Ingram Micro. And they say, would you recommend to start with defining what is success and how it is going to be measured before starting a project with data science?
I do, and that's part of that use case maturity. So you get a great idea, and everybody says, you know what, we can actually do this today. And now we want to kind of mature it. So what is the expected value? the business must be able, in my mind's eye, we highly recommend business must be able to articulate what the value and impact is in the use case way before it even gets started in any kind of development. If business cannot articulate what the value and impact, and when I say articulate, I mean, do you have a formula? Are we going to say, you know, for every person who is able to go and go through checkout with the entire basket, or go through checkout with 3 things from our recommender list, what is it? How is it that we're actually going to measure the success of this particular data science solution? It has to be explicit. So you're absolutely right. That's in the whole vision to use case maturity before it even gets into a development ready state. If business can't articulate the value and impact, it should never be development ready.
Great, thank you for that. Unfortunately, we are just about out of time there, but a big thank you to you, Michael, for sharing your experiences and all the insights that you shared in that presentation, and also to Prolifics in general for supporting the event and enabling us to hear from Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.